Hi guys, we are welcoming all of you at our today's webinar. We are planning to talk about KPIs in retail, and let's begin. As I mentioned before, we are going to speak about KPIs in retail, and there will be some speakers. For you guys today, it's me, Mark Rose. I'm the Business Development Manager, and Anna Irma. Anna is the Head of Business Development. Hey Anna, one more time, just.
Hey, hello everyone. Hello, Mark.
Okay, and let me start with a brief introduction of our company. We have been working with the retailers for more than 11 years in the markets, and Lifio is a platform that helps us to automate the different areas of supply chain with the help of AI and machine learning. And platform consists itself of 3 modules. I will give you a brief introduction about all of them. So inventory optimization helps us to automate the replenishment process, both at the level of store and DC. Our promotion management is the solution that intended to manage all promo activities and forecast sales for the promo period. And our shelf efficiency, it covers end-to-end merchandising process, started from planogram creation to its execution and analysis. And currently, we have projects in 16 countries. We implemented more than 160 projects total, and at the moment, we have around 100 employees in our team. And before start our webinar, I just want to add a few more words about our customers. And I want to say that we are actually working with different type of retailers from different verticals, and our background mostly in grocery retail, health and beauty, convenience stores, supermarkets, and we also had experience working with the electronics, oil and gas, DIY, and toy retailers. And I will pass the word to Anna. So Anna will start our webinar. Anna, your word. Anna, we cannot hear you. I think you're muted.
Yeah, sorry, I'm here. Can you hear me now?
Cool, yeah.
Great. Thank you for the introduction, Mark. Before we go to the topic itself, I would like to mention that what we are going to cover today is based on our expertise in working with the retail industry in terms of the merchandising. We have one of the solutions, shelf efficiency, that covers the end-to-end merchandising process, and everything that we are going to show today is based on our expertise here in this area. And we will be providing some reports in our presentation, and those reports are also made from the Lifio shelf efficiency system. So let's start, and before we go to the KPIs itself, I would like to mention why the merchandising layout is that important. So basically the merchandising layout, so the shelves where the products are situated, is the way how retailer communicates with the customer. So it's the area of communication of the retailer with the client. And of course, obviously, this layout, it should be attractive to the customer. It should be understandable, clear, and very easy to navigate through. But there is a lot that lies actually behind that attractiveness. And besides of being attractive, the planogram should be data driven, and it should be based on some sales numbers, on some profit, and so on. So what's how they say, what gets measured gets managed. So we can manage only things that we know, the data. So how basically we can evaluate the merchandising layout, from what angles? First of all, it's the capacity. So basically it's how much we put in our layout in terms of money, in terms of diversity, in terms of diversity of the assortment and diversity of brands, maybe our private label brands and so on. So how much is in this planogram actually in terms of the money and in terms of the placement itself? The second one is how manageable this layout is. So how we are able to control the first of all, not only like the creation of the planogram, but also like the execution, how our like store managers or merchandisers, they create the layout according to the planogram that were built in the central office. And secondly, it's regarding the manageability, it's how quickly we can adjust this planogram according to the data assortment rotation, according to the some changes in the sales, changes in the demand, and so on. And of course, like we talked about, that the planogram, the layout, it should be attractive, it should be nice to have a look at and easy to navigate through. And of course, like for the retailer, it's important that it should be standard for the customer in each store. So for example, if the customer visits the store in one area and after that he goes to the same retailer in another area, he should like clearly recognize the planogram, the layout, and it will be very clear for him that it's the same retailer, and it of course it influences the customer loyalty. And of course, it should be profitable. Like the main aim of the retailer is actually like to make money, to get sales, and that's why the main aim of the planogram, the way of communication with the customer, it should bring us money, and it should based on like first of all like the sales, and of course on profitability. Let's go further, and it might seem rather obvious, but still it's worth mentioning that the planogram should be, in this case, like to fill all these criteria, it should be item-based, not like category or brand-based. It should be item-based. The item-based planogram is the planogram when we clearly understand what SKU is placed on the shelf, in how many facings, and why it is placed here, because like it brings us the sales, it influences the customer loyalty, it has a good margin for us, and so on. So we should know all these answers. And let's take a look like what's the difference between the like brand-based or category-based and item-based planogram, and why it's critical to have the item-based planogram. So when we have some like a category-based or a brand-based planogram, we just like know the areas and highlight the areas on the planogram that is dedicated for each brand, for example. But when we have the item-based planogram, we can clearly see how many facings, why this SKU is placed here, in how many facings, and we fill the shelf according to the dimensions of each SKU on the shelf, and we are able to calculate like precisely for the shelf how many pieces should be, and that influence not only like the merchandising process, but it can also influence like the logistic process, the human resources, because the manager should have time on like refilling the goods on the shelf and so on, and like the replenishment process of the client as well. So of course it's like very critical for the retailer to have not the category-based or brand-based, but the item-based planogram. Let's go further, and what are the key performance indicators that we are going to cover today? It's like we kind of aggregated them by groups, and we will consider each group of the KPIs. So first group is manageability, so how we can manage the planogram, how we can manage the planogram and execution of the planogram. The second is the KPIs regarding the product range, so what like how diverse it should be, what kind of brands, in what quantity we should put in this planogram. The third is capacity, like how much in terms of money, how much in terms of diversity is included in this planogram. The next one is compliance, so how it is in accordance to our ABCD, how the planogram is created according to the sales that it brings to us. And the last but not the least is, of course, like about the money, how much, what is like the margin that is like we get from this layout, from these planograms. And with this being said, I'm giving the word back to Mark, and he's going to talk about like the first KPI, group of KPIs about the manageability.
I'm ready. Okay, guys. Yeah, we are going to talk about manageability indicators, and I want to say the first group is manageability indicators like money. When we start to analyze and evaluate the layout, we need to understand how well we manage it, and are all the goods that we are like introduced to the assortment and they're on the sales floor, are they like in their places? Are they displayed in the right number of facings? It happens that some products is sold in the store, but it has some sales and it's not recorded anywhere in any planogram. So that's why the important part to understand what proportion of goods from all activities good is manageable. And we can calculate this in terms of money and in terms of the number of SKU. We take the income from the placed goods in the planogram and correlate it with the total income and get it to the share. So ideally, the share should be 100%, or at least it's supposed to strive for 100%. And exactly the same is supposed to be with the quantity of products that place in a planogram. So in our test planogram, which we will continue to consider as example of these indicators, we have worked and come to the facts that the manageability of our product is almost 100%, and that all the products that is already on the shelves, they are placed into the right spots. So yeah, the next part that I want to cover is assortment indicators. And I want to say that the first indicator is the average facing of the category, that it helps us to assess the density of the assortment and determine it with the amount of pieces that is already like placed. We compare the number of SKU and make up the assortment of the selected category with some number of facing, and as a result we get some value that shows us how many average facing of each SKU of our goods can be placed. So for example, if the number of the average facing is bigger than 1, it means that there are like some more facings than SKU, and we have variances to add items to the assortment, to our layout. And the value of this indicator may depend on some categories, and for which categories that will be calculated. And for example, the bigger the store, the wider the facing is, and the smaller the store, the more facings tends to go to 1. So the next indicator is the average width occupied by one SKU in our category. So this KPI helps us to understand how much shelf space each item need to take up and how much, like for entire category, it will take as a result. And the indicator helps us to understand the density of our assortment, but like based on our centimeter, and visually like helps us to understand how many, how to say it in the right way, how many centimeters we will need on how much one SKU will take in our average width. And the figure can be useful for us when, for example, you develop new formats, like for a larger store, let's say, and with the same assortment policy that you will use, you can understand how much you will increase the area of the category of your products and how much space in your shop will eventually need to allocate like for it. And we also
interruption. We have one question in the chat. What is product facing? I will just quickly bump into your speech to explain what we call product facing. So basically, the facing is their number of SKUs of number of one SKU. For example, if we have on the shelf Coca-Cola, Fanta, and Sprite, Coca-Cola is in quantity like 10 pieces, so the number of facings here will be like 10. So we call the facing is the like one item of each SKU on the shelf. Is it clear now? Let's go. Maybe if there will be any questions, I will just like bump into and answer them as well.
Thanks, Anna, for answering the question. I wasn't paying attention to the chat. So I also didn't mention our ABC analysis in our assortment indicators. So at the most simple and at the same time effective tool that helps us to work with the assortment, since ABC analysis will help us to evaluate some effectiveness of the assortment that we will have. It also helps us to assess some like completeness of our assortment as it divided the good into the groups according their sellability based on A, B, C categories. Yeah, we can jump to the next slide. And now let's look at our example of our planogram by using this indicator. So for our analysis, we already took ready-made planogram, and it's like real life example of working with the layouts. So this as an example, we took a sparkling water category, and this category has the same features that many categories have. So here is the shares of brands that can be redeemed, and there are their own principles of layout, like for example, made by liter, by type of packaging, and so on. And in our planogram assortment, each specific brand is different, and it's given that the shares that need to be redeemed and the density of the assortment in the like context of brand, suppliers, and they can be easy like different, and our planogram will be indicated by that way. So we will go ahead and calculate the figures for the average facing and the average width output in the like table on the right that you see in here, like by average facings. So we see that the average facings for our category that we have is like approximately 6 faces. So our 6 facings when we're working with the sparkling water in the normal value of hypermarkets, let's say, but here we see that our like panorama is not the normal like it's not so great. So accordingly that we can conclude that category of the assortment of our example is not good also. So we will pay attention to the like bigger selling brands. In our example, it will be Wilavie that have that have like facing value 8.4 facing, and we will ask like, let's say, why did this happen? And well, first of all, it is like our sales leader in here, and secondly, the brand has bought its shelf and a certain part of the shelf as well. So at the same time, the density of the assortment of this producer, like Wilavie, it will have rather narrow positions in a great number of facings. And if you look at the other brand, like in our example, it will be Coca-Cola and Propel, the occupy for the usual number of facings will be like 2.83 per each category. Guys, if it's not that clear, you can type your questions to the chat and we will go ahead and answer. Okay, yeah, I will jump to the next slide then. And now let's talk about our ABCD analysis. And we took our planogram and color it with the ABC. With the ABC analysis, we also work with the layout and evaluate the effectiveness of the number of facings. So the top planogram, what it was before. And we work with the planogram. We increase the number of facings of category A that colored by like green color in here. And we mark it like best sellers and reduce the number of facing of the least sellers. Like it's example of like red colors, orange colors, and those black colors. So visually, you can see that we have like significantly expanded the layout of sold goods and try to narrow down the low sold goods as much as possible. So you will see it on the bottom example. So after that, yeah, there will be like more selling categories for your shelves. I will pass my word to Anna again. Anna, are you ready to pick up the mic?
Yeah, sure, I'm here. Yeah, so
Okay.
let's go to the next. By the way, the ABCD analysis, which was covered by Mark previously, it is taken from our demo test like system, Lithia Shelf Efficiency, where we are, with the help of different tools, we are able to highlight the planogram according to like the ABCD, according to sales, and so on. So regarding the next next group of indicators, it's actually like capacity indicators. So it means like how much money we invest in like this planogram. And of course, so there are like basically two indicators. One is inventory, so it means like actually like how much money we invested is calculated like the shelf inventory, so the inventory that is placed on the shelf, the number of inventories, and multiple by price. And the second one is for how many days of sales we have the inventories on the shelf. So for example, if like it's Coca-Cola is like 10 bottles on the shelf, and we have sales like approximately 2 bottles in a day, it will be like for 5 days. So it's like the capacity of the Coca-Cola brand. Why it is important to understand these two KPIs is first of all, so the first one is that it allows us to understand how much money we actually invest in our layout, and if we are increasing some category and decreasing some other category, we may either like increase our investment in this vendor or in this particular SKU, or decrease our investment in this particular SKU. So it's important to understand that we don't have some like dead stock on the shelf for a lot of days of sales, and maybe it's a sign for us to like decrease the facing. And also it's like it allows us to maybe calculate some marketing budget so that we can like sell this place on the shelf to our vendor, like for some marketing campaign or so on. And the inventory in days, the second indicator, it helps us to understand for how many days we have stock or like inventories on the shelf. Why it's important to calculate this indicator? Because it will help us to understand, for example, like I've mentioned, that we don't have a dead stock. So if, for example, we have some SKU for like a lot of days of sales for like 30 days, and this good is like a good with good turnover, good inventory turnover, it means that like we are just taking the shelf by this this SKU is just occupying the shelf and doesn't bring us a lot of money. And from the other hand, so if it's like more than one, so that the days of sales, it means that we can also calculate the number of how many refills there should be done per day. So if this indicator is 1, it means that like, okay, for 1 day we sell like all the layout from the shelf. If it's a couple of days, it means that okay, we have the stock on the shelf for like 2 days. And it helps us to plan the number of replenishments. So for example, how many times per day should the store manager go to the shelf and refill the shelf. And also there is some some moment that is important to mention for convenience store, for example, for those stores that have either like very limited space in the warehouse in this store, or sometimes they don't have any space, any warehouse at all. So it's important to understand for example, if we refill this good from the vendor and we get supplies each like 2 days. So in this case, we should have the stock balance on the shelf like for 2 or 3 days, so till the next refill. So that's why these indicators are important to be taken into consideration, and that's why it's important to calculate them. Now let's go further and have a look at our examples. So what we did here, we highlighted the planogram according to the capacity. So for how many days of sales we have the stock balance. It's the planogram on the right side, and we have inventories that we invested in the layout on the right side. So the inventories in money we calculated for the category, so for the like sparkling water in general, and we also divided like have this information calculated by the supplier. So we have here like 5 suppliers and how much we calculated for each supplier on the shelf. And inventories in days, we understand that, okay, for example, for Willavi, we have rather a lot of space on the shelf. And a lot of money is invested here. But if we take a closer look to their numbers, so we can see that on average there is like 3 or 4, the stock balance is for 3 or 4 days of sales. Now let's go further. And the next indicators we are going to talk about, they are really important for the retail industry. The first one is return rate, and the second one is ABCD compliance. So what does it mean? So return rate is basically the rate that shows us the correspondence of the share of sales that this SKU occupies and share in the layout, in the linear layout that it occupies on the shelf. So it's the correspondence and connection of their share in the revenue and share on the shelf. Ideally, this coefficient should be close to 1. If this, so it means that this is like the perfect balance. But if with this coefficient is like more than 1, it means that we should increase the number of facings, and because this SKU brings us more sales, that is, it is placed on the shelf. And vice versa, if it's lower than 1, we should decrease the number of facings. So it means that it doesn't bring us that money as we have the number of facings on the shelf. And the last indicator here is the ABCD, so the second indicator basically is ABCD compliance. So it's like the correlation of the number of facings of category. I mean, category here is like A, B, or C category, or D category that is planned, and number of facings that is like in fact. So ideally, like every retailer has different situation, but by default, the ABCD is like A is 80%, B is 15%, and C is 5%. But each retailer can have its own. And we should understand, so if in fact the A category, it occupies like the 80% of the shelf, and like, or more or less, and B category, it occupies like 15% of the shelf, and so on. And like we saw in Mark's planogram, when we changed the layout for Willavi water, the like green category, it became like more spacious on the shelf, and it has more facings on the shelf. Let's go further, and let's take a look at the return rate that we calculated for our planogram. We calculated it for each category. So for the first, the soft drinks, and we calculated it for like each like subcategory. What we can see here that their soft drinks return rate, it's like close to 1. Okay, it's like more or less fine. But for example, the energy drinks, it brings us more sales that it has the space on the shelf. So probably we should think about increasing the space for the energy drinks. And vice versa, cold tea and sparkling water, they occupy much more space on the shelf, but they don't bring us as many sales as like the other categories. So maybe during like the next iteration, we should think about their decrease, decrease of the number of facings. And now let's go to the next part, and the next part we will understand the return rate not only at the level of category but at the level of goods. So here we can basically see that our Bonacqua and Villa V, it's like more or less fine because the return rate is close to 1. But we can see that San Pellegrino is their coefficients is 1 and 74. So that means that it brings us more sales, like we can see here, and then it's like a share in their width. But we can see that actually the part of it in like the sales is really small. So maybe like even the coefficients is like bigger. Like maybe we should don't really like take pay a lot of attention to that. And the last one, let's take a look at the ABCD coloring for this planogram and compare to how it is in compliance with the ABCD. Basically what we can see here, the comparison of the initial planogram and according to the ABCD analysis and the ABCD planogram after the changes, and we calculated here the deviation between like previous planogram and between the planogram after the changes, and we can see that the deviation for the A category is decreased from 37 to 10. And actually, like A category is the most important one to be analyzed and the most important one that we should pay attention to. For the other categories, the deviation is also like became smaller. So it means that our planogram, it became like more compatible with the like classic planned ABCD like consideration. Now let's go further to the next group of indicators. It's profitability indicators. So basically it's indicators that help us to understand how efficient our planogram is. So the first one is the profit per meter. So basically it's like the profit that we get in money and divided by the linear layout in meters. So with this indicator we understand how much profit we get per each meter of our layout, which is like very important in terms of like maybe considering maybe like during the space management, where we understand how much place to dedicate for each category on the floor plan, and we compare one category by the profit per meter with the other one category, and that will help us to make a decision. The next one is profit per facing. So we understand how much profit each facing, so each SKU, each like quantity of each SKU brings us in terms of the profit. So it's like basically the profit divided on the number of facings. And the last one is like profitability in general. So it's like the margin, so the profit divided by profit in money divided by inventories in money. And of course it's important to track these indicators in dynamic, because the sales are not stable, first of all, and secondly we don't know how like what is the reaction time and so on. So we need to track that in dynamics, and we need to compare these indicators in dynamic. Now let's go to see how these indicators are calculated for our example with the sparkling water. And we can see that here we calculated the profit per meter, the profit per facing, and profitability. So for the sparkling water, for example, it's like more or less close to the like middle calculation. Like all vendors are close to the middle calculation. Profit per facing is also like more or less close. The Propel, for example, is a little bit bigger than the Coca-Cola, but before that we decided there is no reason to increase the facings for Coca-Cola supplier. And we can see also profitability for like each brand that is like placed on the shelf. And as I mentioned, it's important to understand and to track these KPIs in dynamic and to understand how they changed after our changes in the planogram, how they changed in time, and so on. But basically, like what gets measured gets managed. So it's important to keep track of that all the time and create the planogram not only on the attractiveness of the shelf, but also on profitability. This is it regarding our main part. I will give the word to Mark to just summarize what we talked about today. Mark, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I'm ready. I think we went all through all of the indicators, and we can like summarize the results of our analysis and work with like how we work with our planogram. So first of all, we made sure that proportion of the placed good is 100%, which means that we manage the layout and we can change and influence the layout. So the second part that I want to mention, that we have assets the assortment density, and it's low enough, and we can easily expand it to the assortment of our category. So the next step is like, in terms of return, the category that takes more space than salt, and it's like in accordance to like with the fact of the density range. It's not like high enough. We can conclude that it is safe for us to reduce the category, and we will not lose as well like in the layout and our presentability of our products. Okay, and also after we had worked with our ABC analysis, we optimized the layout and we increased the sum sales for the share of the best-selling products in category A, and the share of the layout and presentability A in category A was increased by 70%. And also, we calculated the profitability of our layout for the reporting periods, and we marked these indicators by which we can check the next periods or how much we are working with the efficiency by itself, and how much it changes and increases, and so on. So we can like go ahead and just sum up everything that was said before. Also, guys, if you have some questions left while we are still here, we can just easily answer to them. I think, yeah, we still have like few minutes left until the end of our webinar.
Yeah, thank you, Mark, for summarizing, and I hope that this webinar was exciting and interesting for every participant. And I will add that if this topic of the merchandising is interesting for you, if this process is not well set up in your company, we will be glad to jump on the meeting and discuss like this process with you and showcase our approach to that and the experience of our customers. Thank you everyone for participating. Mark, thank you for being co-host with me.
Thank you for your speech.
Yeah, everyone has a good day, have a good day ahead, and hope that your merchandising process is running smoothly and brings you the results you expect from it.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Thank you guys. Bye. Bye.